Welcome to another episode of the Meal Prep Monday podcast. I'm your host and founder of Prep Dish, Allison Schaaf. Today's episode is how to fight complexity and embrace simplicity. And I'm going to go into 5 different examples of what I mean by this. But before I get into the examples, I do want to give credit to, I know this is not an original idea, but I did hear it specifically on, so Ramit Sethi has a podcast, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And he made the statement that he actively fights complexity and embraces simplicity. And when he made this statement, I actually went back and rewound the episode a few times, like, oh my gosh, yes, that's so true. He was talking about for finances, but he was really saying for his life in general, like that's one of his kind of like rules to live by. And that really resonated with me. And I will get into kind of 5 different areas where I think this can be, you can see examples of this. Of course, he was mainly referring to in finances. And of course, my mind went to, food and meals and the work that we do here at Prep Dish. But I made a note of it and was like, I do this a lot. I have this like kind of running list of like, this would be a good topic to talk about on the podcast. So made a note of that and thought it would be fun to just kind of talk through 5 different places in my life where I can see that I try to apply this concept of fighting the complexity and embracing the simplicity. So I will start with money because that's, where the inspiration came from was with Ramit. And I think in the conversation, he was talking about, he interviews couples. It's often couples. And I think it's mainly couples. But anyway, whoever he was interviewing, they were kind of asking, they wanted to optimize the credit cards that they used and have like a different credit card for a different purpose. And, he said, look, like you really want to don't overcomplicate it, kind of find what works. For me, what I find I often do is like, I will in the beginning go through and like really do a deep dive and research. Like, so for example, credit cards, like really research, like what is the best one? But then once I get to that answer, then I like, okay, this is the one. And I'm going to move forward with it and not think about it again, not have it be a decision. Like once I made the decision, really stick with it and, maybe eventually revisit that, but really not for a while. And oh my goodness, like there's so many things in my life that I purchase where it's like, I don't even want to buy a new, I buy the tennis shoes I love. And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's been 2 years. I probably need a new pair. But like, I really like to kind of make my decision and move on so that I don't have to keep thinking about it and making more decisions, but really having it be like a one-time decision that, ideally I don't have to revisit. I think a lot of things it's like eventually need to be revisited. But the same thing. So when it comes to finances, like, credit cards would be one example, or I think even with investing, I've done a lot of reading on finances lately. And I've noticed that a lot of the books on investing talk about, not overcomplicating it, just really finding like, one fund that kind of encompasses the whole entirety of the stock market and kind of just like going all in on, like something like a VTSAX or something similar. I won't get into like the nitty gritty of that, but it's interesting that some books do try and make it seem so complicated, but the books that have really resonated with me are the ones. And if you're interested to look further into that, one is Simple Path to Wealth. Like he really is like, look, it's like kind of a few easy steps and set it and forget it instead of trying to overcomplicate it. So yes, that's the first area where I think it's good to embrace the simplicity. The second area, and probably no surprise to any of you, especially if you've listened to more than one episode of this podcast, is food and meals. I think, finding a system that works for you and then really embracing the simplicity, not making it more complex than it needs to be. I am a big fan of having a, meal plan and figuring out upfront, like, hey, here's what this week is going to be. Here's the meals we're going to have. And then throughout the week, it's really easy and simple. It's like, hey, everything's already decided. And so you're not having that complexity every night of like having to start from scratch. So it's kind of similar to the credit card example of like, doing this work up front. So then all of the decisions are made. It's like, hey, I kind of went the extra mile, the extra step to like do some deep dive research or to do some, do some extra work up front so that now everything else is going to run smoothly. You could use meal prep as the same example. In our meal plans, it encourages you to do your prep work up front. So then throughout the week, everything's really simple. You've already done all the hard work and gotten that out of the way. And as I'm talking out loud of all this, I'm realizing that sometimes embracing the simplicity, you do kind of have to like get through some of the complexity, I guess, but really getting through that complexity so that you can find the simplicity. So yes, food and meals, another example. The next one, this was just kind of an extension of that, but like what I drink, and this could be translated into, my favorites in any category. But, when I go out to eat now, I know that my go-to drink is a white French wine. Like that's the one that I'm going to go for. And so I can kind of look on the menu and not have to like overcomplicate it. And sometimes there'll be something else that catches my eye and I'll go with something else. But 9 times out of 10, I'll see what the white French wine is. There's usually 1 or 2 options by the glass. I know, which grapes I tend to like the most, or so I'll, ask for a little taster, but it's like, I don't have to go through this complicated thing. It's just like, okay, give me your white French wine. And, that can be true even, for breakfast when I'm here, I know what I have, but if I'm out, it's like everyone has a green tea. So, give me the green tea. So just kind of knowing what your preference is and not having it be this complicated decision process every time you go out to dinner. The next thing is clothing. This is something I've been actually diving into a lot more this year. I think partly because of so our house renovations include our bedroom and closet. So we actually didn't really have a closet before. Just the way the room was set up was like all these big wardrobes. And I guess there was this long stretch of like hanging clothes. It's kind of odd, but our new closet is actually maybe smaller than what we had before, but just much better organized. And so I'm really trying to kind of weed out anything that I don't wear and just be very intentional of like only having items that I really love and having everything kind of a lot of things mix and match and go well together so that there's not this overwhelming amount of items to choose from and having to like put together these elaborate outfits. It's just very much like, here are my go-to outfits and making it a lot more simplified. I've been working through a process. I'm not sure how I just started, so I don't know if I'm going to do the full like workbook, but there's a workbook called The Curated Closet. So I've been going through that process of really trying to be much more intentional. So it's, again, similar to kind of what I've been talking about, like with the meal plans or the meal prep, like doing that work up front. So then in the morning, it's not this big complex thing because I've gone through the process beforehand. And then the 5th area where I really fight complexity and embrace simplicity is scheduling. And I left this broad on purpose because I think I wanted to talk one about the kids' schedule, just really keeping that kind of open and not having it be this really complicated schedule. And then also wanted to include, because I know not everyone that listens to this is a parent or, have kids that are at the age where they're needing to schedule. But also this like applies to, things like work calls. Like I think it's really easy in a work environment to overcomplicate it and feel like, oh, we need to have all of these calls. And there is something to be said for getting on a call and just talking through something versus like, constant emails. But I think also just being able to have, again, this like simplified process of like, we have regular team calls at Prep Dish. We know there's a very specific process and order through our calls. I think I've mentioned on here that we start with doing a happy customer share, like really sharing about any of you that are really using and loving Prep Dish, kind of a reminder of like why we're doing what we're doing. And then we walk through, different, we call them rocks, but goals that we're working on and et cetera, et cetera. But it's just like, it's very simple because I'm not having to, I don't create an agenda anytime we do our meeting, we have a Trello board. We walk through the Trello board. It's the exact same agenda every single meeting. I'm not needing to reinvent the wheel every time we have a meeting. It's like our meetings are on Tuesdays. They're at this time. It's, here's the agenda. Let's not overcomplicate this. Let's just keep it simple. So I'm just constantly trying to see like where are things in my life that are complex, but I kind of use like complicated as well. Like, a lot of decisions that are needing to be made that I can simplify. It's like basically like getting past that decision fatigue that I talk about a lot. And I think by simplifying things, it's like, I don't need to make the decision. It's simple. It's like, I've kind of done the work and now here's the decision. Here's what I'm going to do. And maybe at some point I reevaluate, but for now, it's just like you kind of move through like with all of these decisions already being made versus going through your day in your life, just constantly having to like doubt yourself or your decisions. So hopefully some of this resonates with you. I would love to hear from some of you if you feel like you're actively fighting complexity and embracing simplicity. I am at PrepDish on Instagram, or if you are part of our Facebook group, you can always post any fodder from the podcast on there. If you would like to have some more simplicity in your mealtime, as I mentioned, the meal plans, that's really our goal there, is to simplify your meals, the decisions you need to make about them, have it not be something that's complex, have it like we want to make it simple for you, like as simple as possible. We're constantly thinking up ways to make it where, hey, this is a simple part of your life and not something that you're complaining about. So that's prepdish.com/MPM, short for Meal Prep Monday. Anything we talk about in the podcast, I really try and put in those show notes. So if you need the link for the free trial or anything else that is discussed, always go to the show notes. I know I'm a podcast listener and I really appreciate the podcasts that take the time to put links in the show notes and just make things accessible. So that way I'm not having to pause and like write things down and lose track or have to, I know sometimes it's hard to Google exactly what the host was talking about. So I do try and make the effort there to make sure that the show notes are helpful for you. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you are a regular listener and have not left a rating or review, I would appreciate you taking the time to do that. Maybe taking a screenshot of this episode, sending it out to any friends that you think might enjoy it. Just helps more people to find our podcast and get more listeners here. That is all I have for this week. I will be back again next Monday with another episode.